Hello, my name's Justin the Clue, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club. And today, we're going to get a little bit arty. We're going to be talking about Andy Warhol and Paul Morrissey. Do you know who Andy Warhol is, listener? Of course you do.
He did the soup can.
That's right, and the Marilyn Monroe.
You know, in the future, everyone will be famous for 15 minutes.
I think that it's not a very controversial statement to say that Andy Warhol is probably the most recognizable fine art artist of the 20th century.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because I could ask my dad, hey, you know who Andy Warhol is? He'd go, yep.
Yeah.
And he could point out stuff that he's done.
And I don't think any other artist of the 20th century, even Duchamp, has had a bigger impact on just the way we look at the world.
Exactly.
Like the fact that you can make a painting about a soup can, the fact that his superstars can be stars. Mm-hmm. These are just such influential ideas.
We're not going to talk about their fine art. We're going to talk about their movies. Mm-hmm. Specifically the films that were directed by Paul Morrissey, whose films were often confused as being directed by Andy Warhol because it was Andy Warhol's Flesh, Andy Warhol's Heat, Andy Warhol's Flesh for Frankenstein, while Warhol was more of a producer and an overseer.
Although they did collaborate on some movies early in Morrissey's time at the factory. Morrissey entered the picture of Andy Warhol's factory in 1965, back when the factory scene was kind of at its zenith. Mm-hmm. Warhol, by that point, had done his much-publicized retirement from painting, and he was moving on towards filmmaking. Warhol had discovered filmmaking by kind of hanging around with Jonas Mekas and the Underground, seeing
those lovable bunch of guys in New York.
I was reading something this week that pointed out that the art establishment, like the fine art establishment in the 50s and the early 60s with the abstract expressionists, was very homophobic.
Oh, yeah.
So you can imagine why Warhol would feel more at home with the underground filmmakers.
And the thing about Warhol's early films are that they're the definition of trying art movies. It would be stuff like Blowjob, where you would watch a man get a blowjob with a static camera, or the screen test that he made famous, which is he would put the camera on someone for 3 minutes and ask them to do nothing and just film them. Or Sleep, where you're watching someone sleep, or The Kiss, where you're watching someone kiss, or Empire, watching the Empire State Building and nothing is happening.
There are a couple of phases in Warhol's filmmaking. There's the early silent ones where they are kind of patience testers. They are it's about the idea of making a film for 8 hours of the Empire State Building. And then he moved on to doing films like Vinyl or Kitchen.
Vinyl being a unofficial adaptation of A Clockwork Orange.
Where basically he would plant the camera down and he would put a couple of his people in front of it and they would do whatever they were going to do in front of it. And it's all about him kind of giving up any authorial control. And then when Morrissey gets in the picture, Morrissey came to the factory in 1965, and as I understand it, he was kind of an anomaly in the factory crowd.
He was a very conservative figure. He said that he liked to run the factory like a business, in the sense that there would be like no drugs when he was there, and he wanted to make sure that everything ran very smoothly. That kind of wild and crazy idea that people have of Andy Warhol's factory is something that Morrissey kind of wanted to get out of the picture.
And also, he's not an intellectual, as I understand it. He was very commercially oriented. He kind of looked down his nose at the art world. He consciously tried to reposition the Andy Warhol films as less for the art house crowd and more for the kind of sexploitation market.
And they actually succeeded with their first collaboration, which was Chelsea Girls, which was a 3.5-hour epic that's whole gimmick was supposedly Andy Warhol took a napkin and doodled one side black and went, I want to make a movie that one side is white and one side is black. And the way they succeeded doing that is they made a 3.5-hour film that would actually play on 2 projectors. So there'd be 2 images at all times. One of them in color, one of them in black and white.
And the kind of conceit is, it's all of Warhol's superstars of the time, like Ondine or Mary Woronov, other people like that. And the conceit is they're all like different rooms of the Chelsea Hotel.
Yeah, and it's kind of like almost immersive VR experience, if you will, where there's not really much of a narrative, but you're watching all of these scenes play out.
I have the distinction of having seen Chelsea Girls
on 16mm?
Twice.
I
saw it when I was in university, when I was going through...
This is very important, and I must watch all of it.
Yeah, I was going through kind of a Warhol phase in university, and I would say that I guarantee that I've seen more Warhol movies than 99.999% of people, which means I've probably seen about 10.
Listen, I need to feel intellectual.
And then the second time I saw it was at the Anthology Film Archives, because when I was at...
Did they trick you? You like got into the room, you're like, no!
I'll tell you why I saw it there, is because I was doing for journalism school this radio piece about the Chelsea Hotel, because the tenants of the Chelsea Hotel were in some dispute with the owner, because the owner wanted to turn it into a tourist attraction. And so the tenants did this fundraiser at the Anthology to raise money for their fund, and they were showing Chelsea Girls, and I thought, well, it would be prudent for me if I wanted to talk to these people to go to the event and watch all of it. So I've seen Chelsea Girls twice, including once on 16mm, and I will say that it, conceptually it's interesting.
That's the thing about Andy Warhol.
But here's the thing: the way he recorded the sound, you can't hear anything they're saying. So it's hard.
And Mary Warnow has talked about that. The shittiness of his film is something that Warhol himself strived for. Like, he wanted bad sound.
Yeah.
He wanted this. He took it very seriously because that was the aesthetic that he was going for.
And for his movies that are an hour long, I can get into the spirit. So I remember a few years ago at TIFF, they played Poor Little Rich Girl with Edie Sedgwick.
Yeah, the film that made her a star.
And it's on 2 16mm reels, and the first reel is out of focus and it's black and white. And and it's just her kind of puttering around her apartment in her underwear, out of focus. So it's kind of this like silvery ghost-like image. And I'm watching it thinking, wow, this is kind of interesting. This is kind of a beautiful image, really. And then the second reel's in focus, and I thought, oh, that was a mistake.
That's the thing, right?
Yeah.
And Warhol, if you read interviews with him or even essays about him, like this persona that he crafted was exactly that, something that he created, which is like the artifice and the nothing that can be read meaning into. Yeah. If you show something static with nothing happening, I remember one art critic talking about like The Kiss, where he's like, I'm watching these people kiss, and it's going on forever, and nothing is happening, nothing is moving, and then suddenly they blink, and it's ecstatic. It's like everything to me.
Well, I mean, part of the genius of Warhol, and I think it was a genius, was that his work can be whatever you want it to be.
Exactly.
It can be good that he painted a soup can. You can say this is wonderful that a soup can be art, or you can say this is a sly comment on
consumerism. Yeah.
Or last time I was in New York, I saw this movie he made called Paul Swan. It's not one of his best known movies, but it's basically a film portrait where he plunked the camera down and he had this old dancer, this guy in his 70s who's obviously gay, who kind of putters around and dresses and undresses and pathetically tries to do some of his dances again from his glory days. And because he just lays the camera down, you're not sure what Warhol is basically abdicating any responsibility for what he's showing. He's showing here's this weird guy, and
I'm interested in this person.
I'm interested in him, but I'm not going to tell you what I think about him. I'm putting all the responsibility on you to say, what are you supposed to interpret from this?
Yeah, that's almost all of his pieces, which, like you said, sometimes it's theoretically interesting to talk about or to read about, but then to sit there for 3.5 hours being like, what the hell?
Yeah. So, but those kind of film portraits are easier to watch than,
3 minutes?
Than Blowjob, or Empire or Sleep, which I think are just purely on the conceptual level. They're not meant to be watched.
So, Paul Morrissey is in the factory, and as he had helped Warhol make Chelsea Girls, something happened that changed the fate of Warhol and everything, which was Warhol was shot. And this put him in the hospital. He almost died. I read that they actually had to open him up and massage his heart, and they actually declared him dead. But then when somebody told the doctors he was someone really rich and famous, they went, oh, we got to keep trying. Which I don't know how true that is, but
it's a good story, though.
Yeah, it is.
And I think we both seen the Richard Avedon photo of his stomach after,
which is a mirror in Flesh for Frankenstein.
Yeah, basically. So the agenda of Warhol and Morrissey in terms of filmmaking were very much at odds, and I think even before he was shot, there was a breaking point during the making of My Hustler when Warhol shot the first reel of My Hustler on a beach, where it was just a static shot of like a muscular guy on a beach. But then Morrissey went and reshot it, where the camera starts at the beach house and then it does a pan across the beach and then it lands on the muscle guy. And that's a directorial intervention.
And Warhol did not like that at all.
But who was in charge of distributing these movies? Who was in charge of promoting, exhibiting? Morrissey, because Warhol had no patience for that. So, which reel got sent to the theaters?
Yep, the one with the pan in it.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening after Warhol was in the hospital and couldn't get involved, Morrissey went and made his own movie. The first one in 1968, Flesh.
The first of an informal trilogy, Flesh in 1968, Trash in 1970, and Heat in 1972. All films with the actor, well, I don't know if he's an actor, Joe D'Alessandro.
Oh, I really like Joe D'Alessandro.
I like him too, but...
He's not much of an actor, but he has such an individual presence. His, New York accent.
Yeah. After seeing 5 of these movies in a week, I'll say that I've seen everything in his bag of tricks.
Even though that if you look at his IMDb, he's been in 98 films.
Yeah, well...
Everybody deserves to be famous, right?
He's kind of he's a beautiful man. Mm-hmm. He's kind of a gay icon, I guess, because he's...
Especially if you like looking at his dick.
His dick and his butt.
Yeah.
The signature image of these movies is his ass while he's getting a blowjob.
His pimply white ass.
Yeah. His archetype, I guess, is kind of the blue-collar, hyper-masculine straight guy who can be persuaded to be gay.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in Trash, the second film, he is married to a transvestite. Mm.
And in the first one, Flesh, he's a street hustler to pay the rent, and basically a bisexual street hustler, even though I think he would identify himself as straight.
Now, Will took the bullet and watched all 3 films. Mm-hmm. I went 2 is enough. I watched Flesh and Trash, which are fairly interchangeable, other than the fact that Flesh, I think, feels more experimental, because you can feel Morrissey kind of doesn't want to stray too far from what Warhol did before. Annoyingly, every cut is accompanied with a flash of white, as if the film is running out.
Because it was in-camera edits.
Yep, that's right. Yeah.
And that was a Warholian gimmick, which he never used again after that. I didn't like these movies.
No, me neither. Theoretically, can understand why someone would like them.
But I would rather watch Warhol's movies than Morrissey's. And maybe that's a bit of a controversial statement, but I think Morrissey hates these people more than Warhol does.
Morrissey has talked in interviews a lot that he's a very conservative man, that he doesn't like seeing sex on screen, and when he portrays sex on screen, he wants to treat it as a joke. And in that same interview, he talks about John Waters and how he really loves John Waters' movies because they do kind of share the same DNA. But just thinking me personally about it, the thing about John Waters is he loves his characters on screen. He loves everybody. Mink Stoll, Divine, anybody that shows up, he just likes hanging out with these people. Morrissey hates the people that are on the screen.
Yeah.
He just doesn't like them. He holds contempt for them. And that's not fun to watch.
Yeah. And because he hates them, I have a hard time. Because with John Waters will show you what's beautiful about the people in his films. John Waters creates an entire alternate reality where everything ugly is beautiful and everything that, society would consider beautiful is ugly. Whereas there's not that kind of richness of imagination in the Morrissey films.
No, it's mostly just showing you stuff that you haven't seen before in cinema, and that's why you want to pay money to see it on the screen.
That must have been it. It's just you didn't see these sorts of, quote unquote dregs of society in movies until this time. The movies are compelling to some extent because there's this kind of time capsule quality to them. Flesh is set in New York of the time, so you get a bit of a sense of the sort of Warhol scene in New York.
But maybe it's just we're watching them at a distance from when they were released as well, because someone like Danny Perry, who wrote the famous book Cult Movies, actually has an article on Trash, and he talks about that while some critics consider Trash a cold, ugly film, I think it's oddly moving because here are rare screen characters whose predicaments are worth caring about. And then he quotes George Medley from the London Observer, who goes, "It may be possible to find Trash heartless, but to do so, I think, shows inattention. Every now and then the camera settles on Joe's beautiful dead face, and for a moment there flickers behind the eyes a sense of pain-numbed outrage at what is happening to him. Once a small tear runs down his cheek. These transvestites, nymphos, junkies are in hell. They turn on to give them the illusion of living, the shadow of happiness. For all its superficial air of improvisation, this is a carefully considered, totally responsible film." Something that should be pointed out about this is that Morrissey has gone on record a lot that nothing is improvised really in Trash, and that these are actors acting. They are not shooting heroin, they are not doing drugs, he would not put up with that. So the attraction that it sounds like a lot of critics had was more of, I'm really seeing these people on screen.
Yeah.
When the fact is it's not. Morrissey is making fun of them.
You can sense a bit of kind of this middle class slumming with it. Oh, isn't it interesting that this is how these people live?
Yeah.
I was watching it just kind of feeling bad for these
there's
characters.
Still good performances, in Trash, Holly Woodlawn gives a really fun performance as Joe's wife in it.
Yeah, and Heat, the last of the trilogy, is... I think Flesh is probably my favorite of these three films if I had to choose one.
Yeah, because it is in that world of Andy Warhol still before kind of stepping away from it.
But Heat, which is the last one, is kind of interesting because it's set in LA and it's a deliberate riff on Sunset Boulevard, where Joe D'Alessandro plays kind of an aging child actor who hooks up with his aging landlady, played by Sylvia Miles, basically just so that he can get a discount on his rent. And then a bit of a love triangle emerges with her and the daughter. It's interesting to see this kind of trashy, melodramatic story filtered through the Warhol Morrissey lens. But as I was watching it, I was thinking John Waters could really do something with this.
Yeah.
Like,
this is the non-fun version of John Waters.
Yeah. Like, I can see John Waters in the audience watching this, liking these characters, taking the inspiration and making his own movies where everything is... Like, I can imagine hanging out with these characters, and I hate it.
Yeah.
But John Waters' characters take the DNA of these characters and push it to an absurd, hyperbolic level.
Mm-hmm. So, after these films, Morrissey made a bunch of other Warholian-style films.
Women in Revolt is one of them, you know.
Haven't seen them. Yeah. But what we did watch were probably Morrissey's most famous film, which are Flesh for Frankenstein, Blood for Dracula. We mentioned both of them together because they were both shot in Italy at the same time, with Udo Kier as both Dr. Frankenstein and as Dracula. And they're kind of famous in cult circles.
I think they're okay.
They're fine. Yeah.
I saw...
Once again, Morrissey in interviews has such contempt for horror films.
These are the two that I don't see a lot of Warhol in them. The only way I see Warhol in them is if I'm being extremely generous and I want to say, well, early in his career when Warhol was painting paintings of like Dick Tracy and Popeye and stuff like that.
Oh, like riffs on comics and stuff like that and genre.
So this is maybe in that lineage, but I think that's a stretch.
That's a stretch.
Yeah.
I think it's mostly they gave them the money to go do this, so they did. There's a rumor floating around that Antonio Margheriti, the man who gave us such classics as Castle of Blood and Cannibal Apocalypse, ghost directed these films, which Morrissey vehemently denies.
I think Udo denied that too. Mm-hmm.
But if someone told me that, I would go, oh yeah, I can see that. Because they do have that Italian exploitation feel.
I once saw Flesh for Frankenstein in 3D.
At the Fox Cinema in their 3D film festival?
It was on a double bill with Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D.
Good double bill.
What a night. And I really enjoyed Flesh for Frankenstein when I saw it then, and I only moderately enjoyed it now, and I think you just got to see it with an audience, because an audience will bring out the camp quality of these movies, you know?
I mean, the advantage of Flesh for Frankenstein, great Udo Kier performance.
Yes, very committed.
Yes. And Flesh for Frankenstein has an abundance of goofy gore.
Oh, yeah, terrific. Like, and when you see it in 3D during the scene when Dr. Frankenstein is impaled and his, like, liver or something is on the end of the arrow. Yeah, gallbladder, yeah, and it's like pointing out into the audience. Great 3D moment.
And other than that, there's not really that much to go on, other than the novelty of having this Hammer product set in the 70s that has all this gore, sex, and violence.
And has a general kind of arch camp tone.
Yeah.
Like, there's the point when Udo gets on top of the body of one of his creatures and he just starts fucking it. And then,
you gotta fuck life in the gallbladder, which is where Warhol was shot.
Absolute serious, you know, no winking at the camera. And Blood for Dracula, which I liked a little bit less than Flesh for Frankenstein.
I actually like Blood for Dracula more.
Really? Why?
Yeah. I found it a little bit more moving. I like Udo Kier's performance more. I mentioned that the film starts on a tinkly piano number where Udo Kier, who's like a disheveled, old-looking Dracula, is making himself up in the mirror, like putting lipstick and dye in his hair.
Yeah.
I just found that very emotional in the way that it played out.
I liked Udo's performance a lot. It's very,
tragic?
Yeah, tragic and like kind of camp.
Yeah.
Like a little bit fey and gay.
And the whole joke of the movie is a little bit weird because it's the idea of Dracula is sucking the blood out of the unpure, which is making him sick, which is a weird analogy to what was going on at Warhol's factory at the time, which was he was pushing out all the kind of others.
The freaks.
Yeah, he didn't want them anymore.
Yeah, because once you get shot, then you stop hanging around with the sorts of people who would shoot you.
Exactly. And the thing that Blood for Dracula doesn't have is like the crazy gore and stuff like that, even though it does end with Dracula as a torso.
Yeah. The plot of the movie is that Count Dracula comes to this family home to find a bride, and he's been assured that the three young daughters are all virgins. And one by one he finds out, well, they're not actually virgins because the houseboy, Joe D'Alessandro, has been...
trying not to fake an accent of any kind, just speaking in his normal voice.
Yeah, he's been going to work.
Yeah, that's right.
Another thing that's kind of funny about this movie is that aside from Joe D'Alessandro, all the cast are speaking like maybe their second or third languages, which gives it this, and they're speaking in this kind of like monotone, but again, not winking at the camera. So it has a bit of an alien quality to it.
Yeah, it has that auto-translated feel.
Yeah, I like that.
But other than that, yeah, they're okay. Yeah. Like, I wouldn't give them any, like, hard recommendations or anything, unless you just want to see Udo Kier let loose, which he does in both of these films.
I think they should be seen for Udo Kier, if nothing else. These are, when I think of Udo Kier in my head... and
you think of these two movies? Yeah. Paul Morrissey, after that, would go on to direct a bunch of forgettable films. He did an adaptation of The Hounds of Baskerville.
Starring Dudley Moore and Peter Cook.
Have you seen it?
No, but I only learned about it this week.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either.
But he and Warhol fell out in the mid-70s, I think partly over the fact that these Dracula and Frankenstein movies were not successful. And also, I understand there was a Broadway show that Morrissey made that Warhol kind of signed his name to that closed in a weekend.
And Morrissey always had a kind of anger toward the fact that all the films said Andy Warhol's, and people assumed that those were products of Warhol and Warhol's alone.
Well, after Pink Flamingos, Andy Warhol offered John Waters the money to make his next movie.
Really?
And John Waters turned it down because if he'd done it, it would have been Andy Warhol's Female Trouble.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense.
Yeah. But Warhol stopped making movies in 1976. Bad, Andy Warhol's Bad, was the last film to emerge from the factory.
And that was a famous film in that it cost a lot of money to make and barely got a release as well.
Yeah, and I think after that, just like maybe Hollywood had caught up to the sorts of stuff. It was certainly not the stylistic stuff, but the sorts of stories and the sorts of people that were in his movies were no longer novel anymore. During that decade, he made a lot of money doing commissioned portraits for people, but then there was stuff like Interview Magazine, and he did TV work.
Yeah.
Obviously just lost interest in film.
Yeah, it just became about making money and just being able to, keep that cash flowing.
Yeah, but I think he did some very interesting fine art in the last decade of his life, too.
Oh, is that a contrarian opinion, or...?
I think it's an opinion that's gaining ground.
Okay. Started by Will Sloan.
Yeah.
All right, Will, it's letter time. Our first letter goes... And we got a lot of them, so buckle up, people.
All right.
Specifically Will. Hello. Let me begin by saying that I love the show and really enjoy your witty banter and sexual chemistry.
Wow.
I would like to ask if you guys frequently get movies at the library. As a young and poor aspiring filmmaker, I have found many great out-of-print movies like The Last Man on Earth, Possession, and Paper Moon. I would also like to know if you have any odd experiences getting filmed from the library, like some sort of judgment for getting so many films. I am bisexual and very interested in LGBT films, and feel that occasionally my small-town librarians give me dirty looks, quietly judging me, or maybe it's just my version of the Annie Hall "did he say Jew" scene? Thanks for making such a great show. Thankfully, someone finally pointed out that we do have that steamy nature to our conversations.
We record all of our conversations nude.
Yeah, that's right. I do take a lot of movies out from the library. I'm sure Will does, because he does not set foot in the peasant's abode like that anymore.
Oh, well, growing up, I went to the library all the time to rent movies because they were free movies. And also because libraries have a better selection of classic movies normally than
Netflix or anywhere else or any video store.
Or my local video store. Some of the movies I saw for the first time at from a library were Citizen Kane, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Touch of Evil, His Girl Friday. Also, my local library when I was a kid or a teenager had a pretty robust selection of Chinese movies too.
Wow, yeah. I mean, the Toronto library system has a amazing selection of movies that, like, every time I go, I'm always shocked by what movies they have. Like, oh, Twins of Evil, the new release. Yeah, I'll take that. Or Queen of Earth, a film that costs $39 on DVD if I wanted to buy it. Well, yes, I will take it out of the library. I still take a lot of movies out on DVD from the library because I take a lot of books and I always get distracted by, like, movies they have on their shelves. And my logic is always, I'll take it from the library, which means I will then have to watch it because I have a physical copy. That usually doesn't come to pass, but I fool myself every time.
Yeah.
Thankfully, in Toronto at this point, we actually, if you go to the library, they have automatic tellers that you don't actually have to show people the books you're taking out and they don't have to scan it. You just have to put them on a plate. But I remember as a kid, I would get embarrassed by the books I would take. and like show people and stuff like that. So that's a completely normal feeling. But also, as working as a librarian, I don't care what people are taking out.
I say fuck them. That's what I say.
Yeah, fuck them. If they don't like what you're taking out, they're probably not going to say anything, and they have no power over you. So
anyway,
just show it in their faces.
It's in their library.
Yeah.
Oh, also, growing up, libraries were also absolutely essential to my understanding of the history of film criticism.
Yes, absolutely.
Like
Me too.
So many of the important critics.
Jonathan Rosenbaum I found on a shelf randomly.
Jonathan Rosenbaum, Pauline Kael, Stanley Kaufman, Jay Hoberman, these were all critics who their best work is not online. So and their books are not in print. So you have to go to the library to read them.
So hopefully that helps you out next time you take out a movie that you feel that like you're a little bit awkward about. Chances are the librarian probably doesn't know what that movie is.
Yeah.
And
just know that we've got your back.
Yeah,
the Important
that's right.
Cinema Club is there with you in spirit.
Always. Thanks very much for that letter, Dan Bach. Our next letter is from Thomas Golden. He goes, "Hey guys, just finished the episode about bad movies and was wondering if you guys ever heard of a film called Amanita Pestilence. It's a forgotten Canadian film that my friend needed to pay a Canadian film archive and lie to them about it being for research in order to get a chance to rent it. It's about a man who is obsessed with the state of his own lawn when it starts growing this fungus that drives him to do unspeakable things. It's one of the weirdest and most enjoyable film experiences I've ever had. I honestly don't know if it would count as a bad movie because of how invested you end up in seeing what happens to these mushrooms. If you haven't, I'd recommend finding a film archive to lie and watch it. I'd also recommend checking out the director's IMDb page. He's got credits ranging from The Twilight Zone to the Lassie TV show. A perfect career arc. Always a pleasure, guys. Tom." Now, this is a letter that I wouldn't usually read because it's a specific film recommendation and it makes me go, Tom, are you the director of this movie? But I actually did some research and this film is not available anywhere. Again, the title is Amanita Pestilence. And it was the first color Canadian film ever made in the 60s, was shot simultaneously in English and French.
Wait, the first Canadian color film was in the 60s?
No, the first feature-length Canadian color film, according to the IMDb trivia that I found.
Wow.
I don't know if that's 100% true, but if that's the case, that's crazy. And how is this movie not available? It would never got a VHS release, never a DVD release. You can only get it from, I checked, the Canadian Library of Congress. You can take it out if you go.
Okay, well, if anyone with some sway has
a copy of it, send it to us.
Yeah.
I would like to watch it.
Or if, Piers Handling is listening to this, or anyone with power,
time for a retro screening.
Yeah, do it.
And this also shows an example of that, even if you think that you've heard or seen every movie ever, there's other movies for you to discover. There's always stuff.
There are lots of movies I haven't seen.
Well, thank you very much, Thomas Golden, for that letter. That's definitely a movie I'm going to keep my eye out for. Our next letter is from loyal listener Peter Davies. He goes, "Hi guys, this is the second time emailing the show. I wanted to ask your opinion on political cinema. What do you think are some good political films? As someone who has become politically active in the last couple of years, I've been curious to find films which aren't afraid to deal with political issues in an overt way, excluding Michael Moore. Can or should cinema be used to educate or promote a specific ideology while still being entertaining? Or do you think it's best to leave ideology at the door?"
I think all cinema is inherently political.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But I think there is such a thing as cinema that is didactic and
boring. Yeah. I think that it's impossible to make a film without a political ideology.
Yeah.
Whether it be, you're Jean-Luc Godard and you're like, everything is capitalist cinema.
Or it's just like your standard movie that upholds the status quo or whatever.
And I think that movies that you don't understand its overt political message probably have more of an impact because people absorb that and it becomes part of their everyday.
But frankly, I think there aren't a lot of movies that are going to make a lot of visible change. I think movies historically have been proven to be ineffective at rallying immediate social change. Mm-hmm. Although certain movies have been very influential, often for the bad, like
Triumph for the Will,
Birth of a Nation.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have credited Birth of a Nation with reviving the Ku Klux Klan, and a lot of lynchings were attributed to that film. I'm trying to think of a movie that's changed things for the better, and I'm having trouble coming up with an idea.
I mean, there's a lot of good politically charged film. Battle of Algiers is a very good movie.
The Great Dictator.
Yeah.
And I just saw Battleship Potemkin again recently, and it's very good.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I can't really...
Bulworth.
That really shows us that politicians shouldn't be trusted. This letter continues. He has a lot of questions.
Okay.
Recently, I've been experiencing some major blockage when it comes to my Blu-ray collection. I have Blu-rays I bought years ago and still haven't watched because I never feel in the mood. I know the answer is just watch them, but how do you regain the motivation for something that's been gathering dust for a long time? There's other things I'd like to buy, but I feel like I should just watch what I own first before buying more. What do you think? I realize this is the most minor problem to have, but it is still annoying.
I don't know what to say except you're not alone.
Yeah, I have tons of... Listen, buying stuff makes a person feel better.
Yeah.
Like, that's the truth.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to get the American Horror Project, which has 3 low-budget films packed with special features. I'm going to discover all of them. Yeah, I haven't even watched all those movies.
But you got a little bit of an endorphin rush
Yeah.
when you bought it, didn't you?
Yeah, this feels important. I'm going to experience all of this.
Well, you know, sometimes I'll get something and I won't watch it for months and months, but then the mood will strike.
I remember going to people's houses and being infuriated as a child that I would see a VHS still in its packaging. And I was like, how can someone buy something and not watch it right away?
I had the exact same feeling as a kid, yeah.
And now look at us. We're just fat capitalists on our pile of material goods.
Here's my advice to you. Don't buy things. Save your money. Buy a house.
And, you know, the feeling will come in different ways. Just looking at your film and going, I'm going to force myself to watch that, you probably aren't going to enjoy it.
Although, I think what you can do is kind of say to yourself, okay, on Thursday, I'm going to watch this movie. And then you kind of work yourself, you kind of get mentally adjusted to the idea.
And then you pop that Edgar G. Ulmer film in and you're like, this is great.
I'm always in the mood for an Edgar G. Ulmer film.
Also, we asked, what's the longest you've owned a DVD or Blu-ray before watching it?
It's still going, I think.
My collection has a lot of movies. I'm looking there.
10 years, easily.
Dracula 3 Legacy, the third part of the DTV Dracula film. I actually put it on a few weekends ago and went, I don't want to watch this.
Yeah.
Another day, perhaps. Peter also asks, I was also wondering if the two of you had ever discussed writing a script together. No. No. And can I give a quick shout out to I don't respect Will's talent as a writer, as Larry Cohen said about William Lustig. And can I give a quick shout out to my love, Angie, winner of your recent competition.
Your love, Angie? Wait, were the Important Cinema Club a matchmaker here?
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
Wow.
Write us in, let us know, or tweet to us. Who tells me she never received her Important Cinema Club certificate thingy, which I believed...
We said that as a joke, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Well, I'll write you one.
Yeah, we can make one.
It's just going to be us, like, writing on a sheet of paper.
We will do it right after this podcast.
Yeah,
I'm going to take a printer page. We're going to make your certificate. Okay. And have either of you been watching the new Twin Peaks? And what do you think of it? I have.
You've been watching
Loving it. Yeah. Loving it.
I will get to it.
Keep up the great work, Peter. Well, thank you very much for the letter, Peter. Much appreciated. All right, we're breaking form here because we got another letter.
Why not? Turn the podcast off if you're tired.
Yeah. Dear Important Cinema Club, I love the podcast. You guys are great to listen to.
Shucks.
Blah, blah,
Stop
blah.
reading the part where they praise us.
Insert cliche fan letter content. I like to say, don't stop. Just keep putting it. It makes... Will sometimes walks in and he's like, I don't want to do this anymore, Justin. And I wrestle the gun out of his hands. And I'm like, Will, I got a good positive letter for you. And the letter continues, let me just get down to my point. I just watched the masterpiece that is Dr. Strangelove by Stanley Kubrick, so I realized after recently going through all of his major films, I'd love to hear you guys talk about this man genius and see what you think of his movies. I'd also love to hear you guys discuss some of the conspiracy theories around Kubrick supposedly filming the fake moon landing and how he hid clues about it in The Shining. Love your take on Christopher Nolan. Thanks for the podcast, Jacob Chandler, aka Batman. Whoa, that's a reveal right there.
You don't want to say that in your letter.
About doing Kubrick? I don't really think so, because what would we say?
No, I think we'll get to him at some point.
Yeah.
It's like he's so done to death.
Yeah.
Also, he didn't fake the moon landing. Come on.
He did. No, there's no way.
No.
I feel myself wanting to say stuff about Kubrick that everyone listening has heard 1,000 times before.
Yeah.
If we did him, we would probably do his minor films. It would be an Eyes Wide Shut, Killer's Kiss episode.
Or we could do Fear and Desire and do First and Last.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're probably going to get to him eventually when we're going to need those sweet clicks, which is why we do stuff like Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
But thanks for writing a letter. Whew, just sweating all these letters.
God damn.
What are we doing next week, Will?
Robert Flaherty.
Yep.
This will be a popular one. Director of Nanook of the North.
You know what? I'm going to put documentaries in the title, and then those clicks are just going to arrive.
I only want good clicks.
You don't want bad clicks?
Yeah,
Will, Every click is a good click.
No.
We're going to get that Bloor Hot Docs audience just click and want to learn about the king of...
I would never want to associate with the Bloor Hot Docs audience.
Hello, it's the Import Cinema Club coming live from the stage with the Bloor Hot Docs.
They didn't invite us to Podfest or whatever the fuck that is.
Oh, that's right. We didn't get invited.
Yeah, what the fuck?
Can you imagine having to get up in front of like an audience of blue hairs and like
people who don't know what a podcast is?
Yeah, and being like, we're going to talk about Paul Morrissey and Andy Warhol. Actually, they would probably like an Andy Warhol episode.
Yeah,
it would be like the end of Mr. Bean's Holiday.
Oh well, we saw Warhol paintings when we visited the MoMA during our New York holiday.
Hey, what did you visit when you took a New York holiday?
Of course, I went to the MoMA.
Yeah. And Robert Flaherty is the guy who made Nanook of the North. He's the guy who directed a few other documentaries as well.
But it's Nanook of the North. Not the first documentary, but the first movie to make people understand what a documentary is. And also, not a documentary by today's standards.
Not at all. Yeah. It was also prompted by the fact that I got a diary by the editor of another one of his films. And I decided, well, if I'm going to read this, I might as well get some worth out of it. So let's do a podcast episode about him. You excited, Will?
Moderately.
All right, well, feel that fury pushing you to listen to next week. And until then, my name's Justin DeClue.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening. So, Will, have you punched any Nazis lately?
No, I haven't. I'll later today. I'll get around to it.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, because... For people that are listening to this in the future where the Earth is a wasteland, nuclear irradiated, we're in a political moment right now.
Two big things this week. There was Charlottesville, and there was the guy who directed Kong Skull Island getting angry about the CinemaSins videos. But those were the two big events. When you
talked about it to me, you actually said, like, what is this guy talking about when this shit's going on in Charlottesville?
Well, honestly, yes.
Really?
I do feel that way a little bit.
Did you see that the director of La La Land started a Twitter account just to talk about that stuff?
Yeah.
But how do you feel about that?
I think he's well into. I think it.
Oh wow! I see the pain in your face.
Well,
I can't make fun of this as well.
He's a little. It's a little dorky, yeah. but it's cute. You know,
that's right.
I think it's nice. I think he's well-meaning.
Because you're pro punching Nazis, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, me too. Because how can you not be?
Well, you hear all these dipshits talking about how we shouldn't sink to their level, and punching Nazis isn't going to change anything. But no, it makes them afraid to go out in public.
Yes.
B, it makes them look stupid.
Very stupid.
And C, it makes us feel better.
That's right.
So I think that's great.
Is it going to solve all world problem? No, it won't. But you could even see, all the people that were at that rally got all called out. Yeah. And lost their jobs and their lives were destroyed.
And now,
as it should be.
And now they're all pissed off because they're like, oh, well, just because I was at the rally doesn't mean, so much for the tolerant left.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing about Nazis, to tie it into a cinema podcast, listen, this isn't Michael and us here, is that...
So what are some good kind of Nazi exploitation, Nazi villain movies?
I mean, there's a lot of bad Nazi exploitation. The whole Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS series.
I just watched The Cutthroats recently by, what's the name of the guy who...
I don't remember. He's a guy who made Garden of the Dead. Oscar nominated.
He was Oscar nominated for Best Documentary Short, I think, and then he spent the rest of his career making steadily worse exploitation movies, and The Cutthroats was one. It was a Nazi exploitation, sexploitation, men on a mission movie.
Mm-hmm. And it's a men on a mission movie that's shot in one room.
Yeah.
It's filled with sex.
It was one that so it was 6:00 and I knew that I had to leave the house at 8:30 to go to something, and I thought, well, this'll do.
And it did?
Yeah, it passed the time.
I mean, I'm a huge fan of the macaroni combat films, which are the very little talked about cousin of spaghetti westerns, which are these World War II epics, in air quotes, that were shot in Italy, usually in the late 60s, early 70s. And so there's a lot of them directed by Umberto Lenzi, who is a very prolific director that is very hit and miss.
He's best known, I think, for his Italian cannibal films, like Make Them Die Slowly, also known as Cannibal Ferox was him.
He's also known for his giallos, a lot of them that are not even really giallos, but more psychological thrillers like Orgasmo.
Orgasmo?
Yep. He made a movie called...
Not the Trey Parker film.
Nope, it's not. It's a film called Orgasmo. Famous for George Romero shooting some inserts for it for its American release. just like dolls and stuff like that, mannequins. And so the Umberto Lenzi pictures are good. Enzo G. Castellari made a really good one called Eagles Over London. He also directed the most famous of macaroni combat films, Inglourious Basterds, the original, with Fred Williamson and Bo Svensson teaming up to just take down some Nazis, which is always fun to see on screen. Mm-hmm. And then you also have the weird bit of Nazi cinema, which is actual Nazi cinema, films that were made when Hitler was in power, like The Eternal Jew.
Yeah, like Joseph Goebbels, was under the belief, Joseph Goebbels really admired people like Walt Disney, and he admired was interested in the potential of film to kind of like influence public opinion.
Which led to stuff like Triumph of the Will.
Yeah, but Triumph of the Will is one of the artier examples. Like The Eternal Jew is a much more representative example. But there were also these blockbuster type films they made in the Third Reich. Like there was a Baron Munchausen film, and I remember when I was in high school, I saw the Nazi Titanic film, which is just kind of like a standard melodrama, but it ends with a caption that says, "And because of Britain's endless lust for money, the Titanic sank."
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, there's also films like the long-forgotten epic musical Girl of My Dreams, which came out in 1944, which is just kind of a standard musical, which has the weird fact that it was made in World War II in Germany when like everybody was pure evil.
Well, it's kind of interesting to look at not to compare modern day China to Nazi Germany, but China definitely views its film industry the same way that Goebbels viewed his. Like the Chinese movies are definitely viewed as a propaganda vehicle. A movie like Kung Fu Yoga, for instance, was made to publicize the one road, one belt policy. And they just had a movie out now, The Founding of the Army. Like they do all these big historical blockbusters.
What was that one also that Jackie Chan starred in? It was 1911. Yeah. And even like trash like Wolf Warrior 2 that we talked about last week is pure propaganda. That's like why it exists and why it was funded. But that one is tons of fun.
Yeah.
And, Nazis are bad.
I agree.
And on this week's episode of the Patreon, me and Will watched Mr. Bean, the ultimate disaster movie, and the should be a classic comedy film, Hell's a Poppin'. For $5 a month, go to the Patreon. You'll get that episode, everything we've done up till then, and a new episode every week. Also, the contest that I said a few weeks ago about us watching all the Thumb movies is still on. If by next week we have 50 Patreon subscribers, and I believe we're at about 42, me and will do a Patreon episode about the Thumb movies. And as far as the contest, for the 3 prizes I've talked about before, the names will be drawn this week and will be announced next week.